In this student page, we want to look at specifically domain and range, and then how these ordered pairs would be associated with your domain and range. So we are just given an input-output table. We know that the axes are labeled X and Y based on what is stated up here. So if we just plot these points, -3, -7 is here, and then we have -2, 5. Oops, that one is -5 has disappeared. Back in there. And then -1, -3, and 0, -1, and 1, 1, and finally 2, 3. Okay, so a general description of these points: they were going upward. And then the domain. So the domain is the input values that make sense to this problem. And so we're just going to list out all the inputs that we have here. We're going to use set notation, or the little brace there. So -3, -2, comma 1, comma 0, or sorry, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And the associated output values, which is our range in this case, is going to be -7, -5, -3, -1, 1, and 3. It is important to make sure that you do not connect the points here, because we don't know anything about what's going on. We're just graphing this set of points as they stand right here. Next, if we want to just briefly look at this particular, it says complete the t-table. Well, we know that if there are 3 books, the cost is 18, so that must mean one book is $6, and so on and so forth. And we can fill in that table and then plot the points over here. So we have to be very careful. We know that 9 books, the cost would be $54. And so we got to watch out for scaling our axes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Since there's only 8 spots there, we're not going to be able to count by 1, so probably counting by 2s would make sense. Again, making sure that we label our axes, number of books. We can assign a letter that is appropriate for this, so probably the letter B, or N for number of. And then we have the cost in dollars. And this is probably a letter C, and we're going from 6 to 54, and so maybe we can count by 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. That doesn't do it for us, so probably counting by 10s would be best. It's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then we can graph the points that are there. Again, the domain and the range are going to be these individual values. Now we can shortcut, since this is 1 through 9, we can go 1, comma 2, comma dot 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 8, comma 9, and then the same thing, we can shortcut the range 6, comma 12, comma. Since we know what's happening consistently with each one of these, then we can use the dots to indicate it's going along in the same pattern. And then lastly, I want to look at these other two. Again, this one, same thing, we're just plotting some points. Notice the axes, there's now T and H, W and K, not X and Y, so we have to be very careful that we're assigning our axes correctly. Again, you're not connecting any points here because we don't know anything that's going on beyond what is stated in our table using the equations that are given to us. So then if we skip down to these two, we want to talk about the domain and range in that proper notation. On the Canvas page, we talked about sometimes we could have a list, which I've showed you in the first page, and then also interval notation, because here we're talking about all the points that are going along this graph, which is something that was mentioned in the graphing stories. And so we know the axis here is X and Y. It's also stated within the equation here. And so if we look at all the input values, as this graph continues to go downward, it's getting wider and wider and wider. And so that means eventually it's going to cover all the negative values of x, and that's going to cover all the positive values of x. So we can indicate that the domain is going to go from negative infinity, we always start with the least value, less than the variable, which is x, less than positive infinity, it's going to go all the way to the right. We do not include infinities. We don't include the equal sign. We don't include infinities because we can't actually touch infinity. And then the range, this one, is going down. So the up and down, which is our range, is going to go down all the way. So the lowest range value is negative infinity. Again, we cannot include it because we cannot touch it. The variable this time is y. And it goes all the way up to the value of 4. And it also includes 4. In this case, our inputs, which are years since, and we could probably call this Y, and our sales we call S, and so our domain values are going to go from 0 all the way over to wherever this looks like, probably 11 or 12, probably 11. And then our range values are going to begin here at somewhere around 90 maybe, and go all the way up to, looks like about 350. So our domain would be somewhere between 0 and, this time we're including 0, and we said probably 11. And our range values, we were saying we're going to go from about 80 or 90, and we're using the letter S all the way up to somewhere about 350.